folks, and welcome to another episode of the Snowies Camping Show. You are here with Ben and Lauren as usual, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to wherever you're listening to your podcast. If you're on YouTube, subscribe there as well. Also head to our Facebook group, the Snowies Camping Show. Request to join, get in on the conversation with your fellow campers and also Ben and myself. So today we're actually talking about camping with dogs, and I love my dog. He comes with me almost everywhere and joins me on all of my adventures, so it's an awesome topic to get into, but it's also pretty relevant for you because it sounds like
try and get in first here.
You've got some heavy family pressure for a small fluffy thing.
Yeah, well, I've got two girls and they've got pictures of these little teacup Pomeranian dogs. It's basically a cotton ball with eyes. And they want to get one of those. And it's going to end up being me walking this dog down the street, right? And I've said no. So there's this trade-off in between with something between maybe what I want and maybe a little further towards what they want, which is still small and fluffy. But we haven't got it yet. And I don't have a lot to contribute with camping with dogs apart from what I've spoken about with colleagues at work. So leaning on you a little bit here for experience, but I'm sure I'll have questions.
It's a big choice, I think, especially when you are a camper, to sort of take that into consideration because it can really change how you the sort of trips that you can take and the way that you camp, especially these days, because I've found sort of over time there's a lot more limitations on being able to take dogs with you now compared to, even just 5 or 10 years ago. It is a consideration to take, I think.
Do you think it's a little bit like the rubbish thing with campsites? Like
Definitely.
People who take a dog and aren't responsible with it are then limiting opportunities for others who are responsible to camp with a dog? Yeah,
definitely, because I know that there are some places that used to accept dogs that have decided not to because they have found that there's been some quite negative experiences from people who haven't been responsible with their dogs or possibly haven't been caring for their dogs or being respectful of other people in the space that just said, I'm sorry, but no dogs. I know there are also some places where, especially if you're doing station camping or things like that, where you have to actually apply to, if you want to bring a dog. It's not that dogs aren't allowed, but you have to actually advise them what sort of dog you have and go through that process, and then they reserve the right to either approve or say sorry but no. So I think I think there is a lot of contention around taking dogs, especially if you're someone like me who has a super awesome dog, and it can be really frustrating when you can't take them with you because of other people's choices. So
I guess location is the main one there. So we'll cover today off, I guess, some of the courtesies, I guess, around, trying to make it comfortable for everyone. But location is the first one.
Location would be the first one. I mean, I've obviously straight up national parks, they're just a no-go, and that can make it really difficult because a lot of the really awesome places and really awesome experiences, aside from just sitting around a campfire, will be at national parks because they're places where you can either go on sort of day trips or you can hike out from your campsite and have all these awesome experiences, but you can't take your dogs. So
what do you do then? Do you just not go there?
We haven't been for a while, or we might only, I can't even think the last time we went away without a dog, but there's a couple of trips that I would really like to do which I know aren't dog friendly. So that's just going to be a matter of finding someone to house sit, I'd say, because, I have a dog, my partner has a dog, so technically we have two dogs, and so it's going to be a lot easier for us to find a house sitter if we wanted to go away on those sort of trips. But, it does limit it. There are some places, I think, depending on your state as well, that might be Department of Environment owned, like game reserves or other sort of reserve type places, recreational reserves, things like that, where it's not as strict, and so you can take your dog but they have to be on the lead at all times, but at least you can still take them and things like that. But again, I think the ability to do that is reliant upon everybody doing the right thing.
Yeah, okay.
But the limitations of not taking your dog to a proper national park or a conservation park is literally because, the scent of dogs and waste
Wildlife.
and it's just conscious for
Makes
the wildlife
sense.
and the environment and the ecosystem. So it does make sense and really should be respected. But there are other places like in South Australia, there's a couple of forestry SA sites, and I don't know in other states, maybe people can chime in and let us know if there's sort of forestry sites in other states where you can camp and places like that. Again, private properties, station stays, things like that can be a hit or a miss. Wiki Camps is a really great resource for you to jump on and find dog-friendly camping states that are local to you. Most caravan parks will also accept dogs as well, but they will usually have like rules and things like that around having to take a dog and the things you have to abide by and all of that sort of jazz.
There's Zan, who works with us in the Snowy's web office. She said if you're in a campsite, then you're probably in a campsite with other people who are dog lovers and you want to go to a national park, you could always have like a dog sitting kind of agreement, I suppose, if you're comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
And I thought that sounded like a good idea.
Sometimes that's good if you're camping with friends as well and you both have dogs to sort of take turns in looking after them, or if you do happen to make friends with neighbours in campsites. I think she was mentioning some places that you can go, maybe the if it is a station stay or a caravan park or something like that, the actual caretaker of the premises might be able to provide a doggy daycare thing. But I guess, again, that's also comes down to the kind of dog you have and how they are with strangers and other people and things like that. So being aware of that and really considerate of that and making sort of, planning your trip around the limitations that your dog presents is really important.
What about baits and poisons and stuff? Is that something if you're in a dog-friendly area, you're still having to be quite aware of it? I think national parks
generally not, from my opinion. If it's a dog-friendly area, then we're not really that concerned because most of those places that do fox baiting and things like that, they are places where dogs can't go or places where dogs are allowed but they're strictly on lead only, and they'll often also have signs up, if you're driving through the gate onto a big property, it will have 1080 dog bait signs and things put up there. So it's, in my experience, it's unlikely for you to go to a place that has been baiting and for you not to have any idea.
Okay.
If you've done your due diligence and checked, it's really hard to not know that.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned too, I was going to ask about leashes. Is it a always on leash sort of scenario, or depends on the location? Some require caravan parks, I'm assuming, are probably going to require dogs on leash.
Yeah, I think it's just really important to double check wherever you go what's required, because I know sometimes, for example, especially with my folks or my dog, they're a bit more mature dogs. They're totally under voice control. They're super, super chill. If you're around at the campsite and your dog's sort of not on a lead, but it's literally just laying on the bed next to the fire like a potato, and it might get up and go and drink some water and sit back down on its bed, I think that's a little bit different. But there are some places that do require your dog to be on the lead 100% of the time, in which case you'd probably just, I know for us in those cases, we sort of just set up a spot with the dog bed, water, all that sort of stuff. We just put a tent peg through an extra long lead so they still have the ability to get up and move around. But then that's also has to be a little bit further away from the campsite, because you obviously don't want them wrapping themselves around your chair legs and getting them sort of stuck like that. But my dogs don't really do that because they're, not idiots, but
so use a bit of common sense there, I suppose.
Yeah, just know your dog, know their own sort of personalities and what they're like, and set it up accordingly.
I had dogs as a kid, little Jack Russells, and they were pretty good. They do what they were told around the house, but if they got the scent of something and the front door was open, my brother and I'd be running across town to catch them. So I guess you want to avoid a scenario like that in a caravan park or dog-friendly campsite.
We did also touch before on going away on day trips and places where you can take your dog. But often I think as well, when you're planning for a trip, just because you can take them with you and you might be allowed to take them with you, it doesn't necessarily mean you should if you are doing a particular kind of camping trip where you might want to get in the car and go away for a couple of hours and things like that. You really can't be leaving your dog unattended at the site, even if you think they'll be perfectly happy and even if you think they'll be perfectly safe and it's not a big deal. We've had an experience before where we were away camping and the people at the sort of next campsite over had their dog and it was restrained and it had everything it needed and, for all intents and purposes, its full needs were taken care of, but they would go away and do these little day trips. Every time they went away, the dog would absolutely go bunter for just the whole time that they were gone. And it was obviously really distressed. It didn't like being left there. It just barked continuously and all of that sort of stuff. And it was perfectly, otherwise a happy dog. It wasn't annoying or it was just when they went away. And I'm just like, it's not really fair. So if you're not intending to be with your dog all the time and you think you might want to just leave it, just don't do that. Even not just for the welfare of your dog, but for the consideration of everybody else that's camping around you too.
I guess you don't know what your dog's done while you've been gone as well. You come back and it's sitting there quiet, but it's just spent the last 6 hours just barking and annoying.
Yeah, and nobody really wants to sort of go over to somebody at a campsite and just be like, hey, your dog's like quite distressed and is really cut and sick when you're gone, because you don't want to, and you don't know how those people are going to react either, and you don't want to have a rough time if your camp neighbours are like, get stuffed or whatever.
And you haven't gone camping to have to deal with those things.
No,
you've got to get
haven't.
away from those things.
Yeah, exactly. So bear that in mind as well, I think.
So we're allowed to take them. We've covered off on a heap of our notes here already just in this conversation.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one. First aid. I wouldn't have thought of that, taking a dog away, but knowing, I guess, where a vet is and do you have a dog first aid?
Generally sort of if you think about when you go camping, all the considerations you take for yourself or your children, making sure that you're also taking those considerations for your dog, because if something happens to your kid and you need to apply first aid, something also might happen to your dog. I mean, it also depends on the kind of dog. Like I've got Australian working breed dogs and they generally tend to be quite robust, but you might have other dogs that aren't as robust that might be more prone to injury, or, they might eat something that will make them really sick, or
like a Pomeranian.
Like a Pomeranian, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to get into dog breeds. I don't want to be a doggist, but it's like if you my dog accidentally one time, and I don't know if I want to tell this story, but he accidentally one time when we were away, he somehow managed to break into this elaborate pipe trap with rat bait in it, and he ate all the rat bait, and I absolutely freaked out and took him to the vet, and the vet was like, look, he looks totally fine, just keep an eye on him for the next couple of days. Totally fine. Literally nothing wrong with him. Totally fine. But he'd just eaten all this rat bait. Totally freaked me out. But at least then from that perspective, I'm like, I think you're a bit bomb-proof. So I don't stress too much if he's gone and eaten a random plant or things like that. But you might have a dog who's a bit more susceptible to that sort of thing. And in which case, you want to be prepared. You want to have some sort of basic idea of how you can support them if something does happen, and the closest vet that you can go to, or what's available for you to get help if you need it. So having a little bit of extra with your first aid kit and stuff that's specifically relating to your dog is really important.
I guess it comes down to water and food. Water in particular. You're taking water for yourself, but enough water for your dog too.
Yeah, you need to factor that in when you're carrying water, enough water for your dog. If you're taking food as well, making sure it's being stored properly, especially you don't want rodents or possums or other animals getting into your food storage, ants, flies, like all of that sort of stuff, having really good, safe ways to store your dog food when you're gone, making sure they've got a collar and they're also registered as well, because I know like within South Australia, all animal registration now possibly is national. So wherever you go, if your dog's got their registration tag on their collar, information can be pulled up about who they're registered to and things like that. Right. Because not everywhere will have the ability to do a microchip scan, if that makes sense. If your dog happens to break off its lead or get away from you, or something happens and it's scared and it nicks off, or even just having a collar with easily identifiable stuff on it is really important. Another one, like our producers left a note here, which I think is important, not as important for us because we're in South Australia, but things like ticks.
Oh, yeah.
Ticks are really important, checking if they're at risk, where you're going to go, learning how to check your dog over, make sure you can identify ticks, how to remove them safely, all of that kind of stuff.
Because they can be dangerous, can't they?
They can be quite dangerous.
Yeah,
I think they can do like your dog can be paralyzed.
Okay.
Paralyzed?
Paralysed.
Thank you.
You've added a few extra letters in there.
Oh, man.
Paralysed.
Yeah, they can become quite unwell from things like that. Even actually, if you do have a dog that has longer hair or any sort of dog. When I was growing up, we had a Dalmatian and she was really prone to grass seeds, even though she didn't actually have long hair.
Okay.
But she would get them sort of stuck in between her feet and they would like burrow into her skin and make her really sick. So if you're going somewhere where, you know, there's lots of dry grasses or grass seeds or things, just every night just sit down with them next to the fire and go through their feet and just F her and take a brush with you if they've got long hair and brush out. Just because some of that stuff can really affect them. So being aware of that side of things too.
Question on food then. I asked once again Zan, our colleague, before how she manages food in camp, because I know if I don't leave food for my kids and everything out because insects and animals get into it. It's cleaned up pretty quickly. But Zan was saying she has like a little sort of setting for a dog where there's the peg that you talk about and the long leash and water bowl and the food bowl kind of just a little bit separate from the main camp area for the dog. And my question was, what do you do with the food? Like, does your dog eat it all? If there's food left over, do you leave it there? And she says she doesn't give it a lot. Like, she gives it enough that it will eat everything. So the bowl, like wet food, doesn't stay out because that could be, you know, native animals and stuff might eat it, or you get ants and things in the bowl and then the dog doesn't want to eat it. But she says she'll have dog biscuits, but she's quite happy just to leave that and the dog will chew it, gets a few ants on it, but they can shake the ants off and the dog will continue to eat it. How do you manage?
I think it depends on the kind of dog that you have, because my dogs don't eat dry food at all. They're like raw food diet dogs. Right. So they just get food. When we're camping, we find we feed them a little bit in the morning and a little bit at night seems to be the way that they go. Or we'll feed them in the morning and then they get, or like generally I try to give them like a bigger bone in the morning, and then that way they're also happy throughout the day just chewing on their bone and they're not too stressed. We can go for a walk and come back and they'll just have a bone there and things like that. And then at night or in the afternoon they get a bit more food because they generally tend to burn a bit more energy. Even if you're not necessarily going anywhere, they're more alert because it's a new space, there's new smells, there's new things around you, especially if you're out in the bush and animals around or other people around. I don't know, I find they tend to like to have a little bit of extra food when we're away. But apart from a bone, their food's just gone. I don't have anything really hanging around for them.
What about the other end of food then, dog waste? Is that you treat it much the same as you would a human bush toilet?
Yep.
Bury it or carry it out?
It depends on the sort of trip. If we can easily bury it, then we'll 100% bury it. Just go and scoop it up and bury it, and which is a lot easier to do, especially if you've got your own sort of cordoned off area and they're on the lead. Otherwise, you know, just put it in a dog bag and chuck it in something like a dry bag or things like that. But obviously you don't want to be doing that if it's summer. So if the weather's hotter or it's summer or things, because it's a bit grosser, just try and bury it as much as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you? This is going to sound weird. Can you burn it?
I wouldn't, and I haven't. And I was thinking to myself, he's going to ask if you can burn a dog turd.
Should I ask?
I don't know if you want to burn it. Would you burn a human turd?
Well, no, because
would you burn a dog turd? I don't know.
I feel like we should stop this conversation. But if anyone burns their dog poo, let's just keep it a dog poo.
I would just be like,
know.
I can the smoke and wouldn't do it. I don't know. I feel like that's quite a weird thing to ask.
Sorry, might edit that bit
out. No, I wouldn't burn it. But bury it. Yeah, but clean up. Just clean it up. Whatever you do with it, clean it up. Yep. Don't just leave it there.
Same goes back to that leave no trace.
Yeah, leave no trace. You don't want to rock up to a campsite with like squishy dog turds everywhere. It's gross. Don't do it.
Don't make it look like a dog's been there.
Yeah,
should look
exactly.
Like footprints and tire tracks, right?
Yep.
Sleeping arrangements. Now, once again, I interrogated Zan before this. Her dog, she said she's a softie and her dog sleeps with her on the bed all the time at home. So it's the same in the tent. And my thoughts immediately were like, my tent's set up with four or like a double self-inflating mat and two singles for the kids. And my immediate thought, if a dog's running around in there, I'm going to have holes in these mats.
Yeah.
But Zan said, never thought of it. It's not an issue. Now she has a swag in the tent.
Yeah.
And the dog sort of sleeps to the side, so there's a bit of floor space around because she's got older kids. But she said it hasn't been an issue for her. So.
My dogs generally are outside dogs. I mean, obviously they sort of still come and go and are in the house and they're around us all the time, but they do have a kennel and they have bedding outside and things like that. If they do come inside, they've got like a little dog bed that they can stay on inside. So when we go camping, they don't sleep in the kids' tents. They don't sleep in the van with us. I think there was one night recently where they did sleep in the van because we had a couple of things gone wrong on a Friday afternoon and we didn't leave until almost dark. And then by the time we actually rolled into the campsite, it was like 10 o'clock at night. We too late to start a fire, any of that sort of stuff. And we checked the weather app and it was going to be like -1. So we were like, right, dogs sleeping in the van with us. So we just sort of put their bed on the floor in the van. But they actually hated it. They wanted to be outside even though it was freezing. But generally we have like a tarp and sort of like a couple of swag annex poles, and we just sort of peg it down almost like a hoochie type setup, and the dog beds just go under there. And if it's going to be dry, then their dog beds just go on the ground. And they've got like a bunch of blankets and they're big fluffy dog beds, and they just go underneath this shelter thing, and then they're perfectly happy.
So same concept as our beds, I suppose. If it's cold ground, insulate from the ground for them so they've got somewhere warm to sleep on.
Sometimes when it's hot, they don't end up sleeping, or we noticed a couple of trips when it's really warm, they don't sleep on their beds. They drag their blanket off and they just sleep on the ground on a blanket, or they just sleep on the ground. So on those trips, we don't even bother packing a bed. We just have some blankets and like fold up their dog blanket, and they just make themselves happy. But again, it depends on your dog. Like if your dog does sleep inside on your bed, or they're asleep inside all the time, you might want to have them in with your tent. They've got I've actually been keeping my eye on these things that we sell. I haven't got them yet, but they're like a quad fold chair, but instead they fold out.
Wider and flatter.
Yeah, a large big square for a dog bed. My folks have got one for their dog and she absolutely loves it. And so I've been thinking about getting one, because then you don't have to take big padded beds, because they can take up quite a lot of room. I mean, when we transport our dogs, there's like a spot and they just sort of stack in there. But something like this, it's like almost packs two. I think this is the large one maybe.
Small, that one.
This one? Is
it's
it the 62 one?
Yeah, it's just down there. Small.
So that's like a kid size. Even the larger one, it's like a kid size camp chair. So it doesn't pack up very large. Yeah. It's not super heavy. And then in that case, you probably wouldn't even need to bring blankets or extra thing. They'd be perfectly comfortable sleeping on that.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, I've been thinking about it, which I think would be cool to get these, possibly down the track when we need to upgrade their bedding system or whatever.
Otherwise just yoga mats or something, I suppose, just something for them to sleep on.
Some people do use like old yoga mats and they just cut it down and because it's just soft and insulating. Other people take fluffy dog beds, the big sort of padded pillow type things. Otherwise you just blankets. I think it just depends on your person. In terms of like traveling with them in the vehicle, we have a crate. Like it's called a dog crate. It's like a collapsible big dog crate, but that particular crate fits both of them in. So when they're traveling, they're just both in that dog crate, and then their sort of beds are in there with their blankets, and they just sit in there and happy. And then obviously, we do stops and things like that, but they are totally contained within that. And in theory, you could probably use, I think we were sort of taking the dog crate with us and they were sleeping in that, but it was just a bit heavy and trying to pull it out of the van and things like that. And they more often than not didn't want to go in it anyway. They just like to be in their beds. So I think it just depends how you set up their sleeping arrangement. Depends on the actual dog that you have.
Okay. When you're talking about travel there, I asked once again Zan about this, how she manages it as well.
Yeah.
And she's a little bit different. She doesn't use the crate, but she's got a dual cab. And she says when they stack the back of the dual cab, it's all secure. They stack it so it's secure, and there's a spot in the middle where the dogs can rest, and there's blankets and things for them to sit in there. So they're in the cab on the back, because I don't know if there's actually laws around where they should be carried. I think they need to be in a cargo area or secure. I don't think you can just have a dog running around the cabin of the car. So
I mean, ultimately, when you're traveling, my idea or my thoughts are you want your dog to be as safe as you are. Yeah. And if you've got seat belts and you're restrained, so in the instance of a crash, your body's not being flogged around the cabin, you want the same thing for your dog. Like even from the perspective of if you have your kitchen tub in the back of your car, for example, if you have an accident and that's not secure, that's an actual projectile that's bouncing around the cabin that could kill you. Same thing with a dog. Like not just considering the dog's safety, but your safety as well. If it's an unrestrained mass in an accident, it's going to wreak havoc. So I think there's a couple of different options. They can wear like harnesses that click into a seatbelt if you want them in the cabin with you.
Okay.
You can have them on the back seat. Depends if you've got kids or not. In our particular instance, we have, as I said, that collapsible cargo, like dog crate thing, cargo barriers, things like that.
Okay.
I mean, I think if you've got a boot and a cargo barrier and like in Zahn's situation, the dog is safe in the back from that perspective. I think it's probably going to be, I don't think you'd have to restrain it in the cab, but I'm not sure
I think
ultimately
like
if there
Zahn
is
said,
legislation.
The cargo in there is also secure because that projectile, if the dog's in the back and your kitchen tub becomes a projectile, then your dog So she says it's all secure in the back. I'm not quite sure how she does it, but yeah. And she also says lots of stops. It's a bit of a slower trip, but stop regularly so the dog can get out and have a wee.
I think it's easier if you have kids because you have to stop for your kids anyway. Yeah. So every time you stop for a wee stop for your kids, your dogs just get out. And my dogs are pretty good because they'll let you know when they need to go to the toilet. Generally, that they get a little bit antsy, and then they're like, if they start whining, you're like, okay, pull over pretty much now.
Yeah, okay.
But
makes you stop more. It's probably good for you anyway to have more rest. So.
Yeah, definitely.
And Zahn also says she has like these bowls. Like this is a little collapsible bowl from Cedar Summit. You can get various brands. She says she just keeps that in the door. So when they stop, this just goes on the ground, gets a bit of water in it so the dog can have a drink. There's a soft version of it here.
Yeah, same. I use this. This is what I use. Okay. It's like a collapsible kitchen sink, but it's only a small 5-litre one because that pack's super small, like the size of a wallet or something like that.
So you've got to make sure you're hydrating your dog as much as yourself and your kids.
The water is just always there.
Yep,
always there.
Yep. We've had a pause.
Yeah, we've had a pause. I think I'm just trying to rack my brains to think if there's anything else we need to cover.
I'm just
going to quickly go through my notes here.
Airflow, they've said, we've noted here, obviously, when they're travelling comfortably, make sure they're also in a ventilated space. And I guess considerations around transporting gas and that sort of thing is the same for dogs as well as it is humans. You probably don't want them in a cabin where you've got gas bottles and stuff.
And fuel and things like that.
Separate from your cabin if it's a dual cab. But
I think it's just a lot of it. I think in terms of travel and camping with dogs is common sense, and just apply the same sort of thought and care to camping with your dogs as you would for your kids or for yourself. Mm-hmm. And then also bear in mind that wherever you're going, the trips you're going to take, can you take them? Are you allowed to take them? Just because you can take them, should you take them? Be considerate of other campers as well, because it's not super fair for other people's trips to be ruined. I mean, within reason, some people just don't like dogs, and even if you've got the most awesome dog in the world, they'll still just be like, bloody dog or whatever. You can't change those people. You can't. But just as long as be aware of sort of what you are and aren't allowed to do, and make sure you've cared for all their needs, and then you're right.
Don't leave them in the car.
Don't leave them in the car.
I think that causes a lot of people distress. You might think my dog's fine, but other people look at it and think,
other people don't know how long your dog's been there. Like even if it's in the car for 2 minutes because you just really quickly popped into the servo or whatever, people don't know that you've only been in there for 2 minutes and you're coming back any second now.
Dog lovers. You don't want to end up busting your window. Help it out.
Have a smashed window of your car.
So
don't do it. I think that's about it. I reckon we've sort of wrapped up.
I think I'm ready.
Wrapped up the dog episode. You ready to buy a dog?
Ready to go camping with my.
You ready to buy a dog? You ready? It's a huge big step. Yeah. Teacup Pomeranian camping. People are going to be like, "What is that dog really belong to that guy?"
It's going to be bigger. I'm slowly getting bigger. We'll see how we go.
Just work on it. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Snowy's Camping Show. If you do have a dog and you camp with them regularly, let us know your thoughts, or your tips, your tricks, your ideas for Ben and his upcoming family adventures with a doggo. Don't forget to subscribe, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, wherever you're listening to the podcast, and we will catch up with you in the Facebook group. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.
Catch you later.
Bye.